On the 15th of August 2013, the Wall Street Journal reported that the total indebtedness of the world, including all parts of the public and private sectors, was a staggering $223 trillion, more than 3 times the value of the entire planet's gross domestic product. Any online search engine will locate the interest-burdened debt clocks of the world's nearly 200 countries, and you will find that the G7 nations we are told are the most affluent in the world are in fact the world's greatest debtors. Common sense tells us it's impossible for every nation on the planet to be in debt at the same time, and that such an astronomical amount can never, ever be repaid, no matter how high governments raise our taxes and hidden fees. It's clear beyond doubt that our money system is fatally flawed and desperately needs replacing. In fact, this incredible level of worldwide debt raises some obvious questions. Who do we owe it all to? How can one bankrupt nation bail out another bankrupt nation? Why does every national government accept the bank's argument that this political economic crisis can only be avoided by inflicting severe austerity measures upon the people, such as raising taxes, cutting social programs, and selling off every possible public asset? And how does this equate with bailing out failed banks with trillions of dollars and paying billion-dollar bonuses, all magically created out of thin air, to the bankers who helped create this economic catastrophe? How was it possible, without causing inflation, to instantly create such massive funds when there was no dramatic growth in economic activity or increasing gold reserves to back them up? In fact, quite the opposite. If funding of that magnitude can be created and donated to bankers already fat with excess profit, why cannot the same process be used to eliminate debt, poverty, hunger, debilitating tax levels, and the economic insecurity that is at the root of so many wars? Money has become nothing more than a fiction, a charade, an electronic blip on a chip. Yet the experts tell us that high finance is far too complicated for the average person to understand. We're about to prove to you that the fundamentals of money creation and control are incredibly easy to understand, and that there's absolutely no shortage of money, unless we run out of electronic zeros and ones. In the course of the next 10 minutes, we shall not only expose the myth of our money system's supposed complexity, we shall reveal a simple and viable solution to economic hardship. It's our belief that once people have a true understanding of how we got into our present financial mess, solutions become self-revealing. For the sake of simplicity, we're going to use one country, Canada, to demonstrate the sequence of events that have brought about global bankruptcy. The fact is, it doesn't matter what country one uses, the basic flaws are near identical. So let's explore this chart for a few moments. You'll note that the left-hand side, from Canada's Confederation in 1867 to the establishment of a central bank, the Bank of Canada, in 1934, is virtually a flat line of relatively insignificant debt. Here's why. The astute politicians who drafted Canada's Constitution of 1867 understood that no country is a sovereign nation that doesn't create and control its own money. They wanted to ensure that the sole and exclusive right of money creation in any form and in perpetuity should lay with our elected government. During this period, the Canadian government, via its treasury, created and spent money into circulation at low interest for the benefit of the people, as our Constitution intended. These were Canada's glory years, in which they developed huge, world-class projects, including a Canadian national railway from coast to coast, the St. Lawrence Seaway, the world's deepest and longest waterway, They built the Trans-Canada Highway, the world's longest national road, and established with public funding, that is, taxpayers' dollars, 28 crown corporations, creating huge public profit from industries as varied as telecommunications, oil, potash, air, and railway transportation, and hotels. They funded their military through 2 wars, ranking Canada 4th among the Allies in war production, while building and operating the 3rd largest navy in the world. At the end of the war, Canada's debt was $18 billion. Now observe the right-hand side of the chart. Can there be any argument as to where our government went wrong? It shows how the establishment of a centralized private bank in 1934 led to a veritable tsunami of interest-laden debt at every level, from postgraduate students to the federal government. Amazingly, all it took was 14 words in a piece of legislation that illegally amended the Constitution to pass the sole, sacred, and exclusive right for creating Canada's money to a handful of private bankers who were responsible not to Parliament, but to the privately controlled Bank for International Settlements, the central bank's central bank located in Basel, Switzerland. Meanwhile, the Bank of Canada's Board of Directors contains not one elected politician to provide accountability to Parliament and the Canadian people. From this point on, under a totally privatized banking system, instead of printing Canada's money, the government began printing Canadian bonds, selling them via an exclusive and unidentified syndicate of largely foreign-controlled investment banks and bond dealers. These securities are a debt obligation that promise repayment of principal upon maturity, plus periodical interest payments. In this way, government pays compound interest on borrowed money they had the constitutional authority to create for Canadians interest-free. Only 2 further administrative steps were necessary to perpetuate Canadian debt slavery. The first step was to allow banks to create as much funny money as they wanted. This was done primarily by reducing bank reserve requirements to 0. The second step was to embody compound interest as the sole method of compensation for money borrowed, and by these means we bought our mortgaged homes 3 to 5 times over, and our talented children will still be paying off their university loans when they're in their 30s and 40s. The results were not immediately apparent, but eventually Canada's debts began to climb dramatically, following the exponential curve, the hockey stick curve, which is the classic pattern of compound interest growth once a debt becomes unrepayable. It's not that the near criminality of compound interest isn't recognized by governments. They could totally criminalize its use. It's that, apparently ignorant of their constitutional powers, they feel helpless against the power of the international banks. Therein lies the heart of our economic problems, and therein lies the solution: a return to low interest or interest-free constitutional money, this time created and controlled by a truly nationalized Bank of Canada, with the Minister of Finance as its chairman, accountable to the people's elected parliament. The third step required that all major political parties become dependent upon funding from private bankers to ensure that the debt money system remains unchallenged. In the process, democracy has been replaced by elected dictatorships, while money men and politicians make the really important decisions that affect every one of our lives. This chart shows it clearly. Between 1968 and the present day, Canada's federal government debt alone has risen from 30 billion to more than 800 billion. Canadians flip-flopped between 2 major parties 5 times under 19 different finance ministers, but the curve of debt moved on relentlessly. Logically, the only peaceful way that this insane pattern can be broken is by voting for independent candidates who have legally committed to upholding and defending the Constitution and acknowledged in a written witness statement that their first responsibility will always be to their electorate. It's time to recognize that while well-meaning and dedicated men and women fill the back benches, big party politics is a giant con game. Today, Canada is virtually bankrupt. In 1965, Canada's gold reserves totaled 33 million troy ounces. Successive governments have furtively sold off every last ounce and reduced those reserves to absolute zero. Using these funds to convince the public they were wrestling the deficit to the ground, these proceeds quietly passed via general revenue to the banks as interest payments, but still the debt kept growing. Canada then went on to sell to unidentified wealthy private buyers such huge world-class public assets as Petrocan, Canadair, Air Canada, and the CN Railway, all of which had been acquired using the taxes of present and past generations of overtaxed workers. Now the focus of big money is on buying up all water rights, more precious than gold or oil. But nothing will be overlooked, including land, the rich natural resources both on it and under it, and every public building from water treatment plants, libraries and prisons, to power plants, hospitals and universities, as privatization roars on. As millions of people around the world begin to realize that our present debt money system is nothing more than a gigantic Ponzi scheme of indebtedness, we are beginning to enter a new era. But if we and our children are to have the prosperity, peace, and security we deserve, the present money system must be replaced. For more details, solutions, and documentary proof, I warmly invite you to visit our website. You can access our homepage anytime by clicking on the COGS logo in the upper left-hand corner. Thank you.